When my wife's family was visiting earlier, we were talking about how long we would wait until we have our next child. I asked my mother in law how long she waited between having children, and she said 4 years. My wife corrected her and said, no, 6 years, which I could see my mother in law reacted oddly to. Reason being, my brother in law is 37, and so if he's 4 years older than my wife, that would make her 33. After seeing this exchange, my heart sank because I knew in my gut that my wife had been lying to me about her age. This is because this event marked the third time in 2 months that I had encountered information that suggested my wife has been misrepresenting her age. The first time was in the hospital when my wife was going into labor 2 months ago. On the display of the medical device, it listed her birth year as 1990, and I pointed out to the nurse that the date was incorrect. They said they would need proof in order to change that date. So my wife showed them her old ID with her maiden name, and the nursing staff was able to make the change. I thought it was weird that the system would have the wrong date, but my wife said her old ID had a clerical error, and that was the one that she had registered with the hospital. As I understand it, these errors are rare and can only be corrected by showing 2 copies of your identification. In this case, passport and birth certificate. For some reason, this stuck with me in my head, and I started questioning myself on the subject, but ultimately, I decided to believe my wife. After all, I had seen her ID before, and it said 1992, and we filled out our marriage license with that date without issue. The second time was a month ago when my mother-in-law was visiting and talking about when my wife was a baby. Since I was already having questions about my wife's birthday, I asked her, "And what year was this?" To which she replied, 1990. I asked her if she meant 1992, and she said, "Oh, yes." At this point, I was on high alert that something was up. I mentioned to my wife after the family had left that it was silly of her mom to forget what year she was born. My wife responded that she didn't know what I was talking about and that she didn't think her mom would have said that. I told her that I definitely heard her mom say that, but she told me that I must have misheard her, or her mom made a mistake. At this point, I went through my wife's closest friends' Instagram profiles and saw that the majority of them were in their mid-30s, not early 30s. Being overwhelmed by what I was seeing, I convinced myself that I was probably overthinking this whole situation, and that the clerical error, her mom forgetting her birth year, and her being the youngest of all of her friends by a bit, were unlikely coincidences, but not impossible. I stopped short of going through my wife's belongings, as that would be a massive invasion of privacy, and she would certainly be aware as she is home on maternity leave. That leads us back to the present and the family discussion about her brother's age gap. Of course, I brought this up with the thought of entertaining my suspicion, but seeing my mother-in-law's reaction to my wife's correction told me everything I needed to know. This was the third insinuation that my wife was born in 1990, and at this point, I couldn't deny it any longer. I excused myself for a bathroom break, and her family left shortly after I returned downstairs. We cleaned a bit and got the baby changed, and when my wife sat down, I said that something was bothering me and we needed to talk. I explained to her that 3 times over the last couple of months, there have been insinuations that my she is 33 years old. She responded that it's because she is. After some silence, I asked my wife to explain herself, and she said that this all traces back to when she got her driver's license in 2018. A clerical error had indeed been made, but one that printed her birth year as 1992 instead of the one on her birth certificate, which is 1990. As a result, she started getting jobs with that identification, and for reasons that remain unclear, decided to use that age on her dating profile before we met. At that time, I was 23 and was only looking for matches between the ages of 20 and 26. So I distinctly remember her profile having that age setting, something which she still denies intentionally doing. On our first date, I even remember looking at her license, since we got cocktails at dinner, and sure enough, her birth year indicated that she was 26. I asked her why she would lie about her real age, and she said that she never knew our relationship would get this serious. The longer time went on, the bigger this lie became. She said that she has wanted to come clean about it for a long time, but she was afraid early on in our relationship that I would have left her if I knew she was 5 years my senior. To be fair, she may be right, as this would have been a larger age gap than I would have been comfortable with at 23. She even tried feeling me out at that time, asking questions like, "What would you do if I were even older than I am?" And I had answered basically that we probably wouldn't be dating in that case. For fear of losing me, she let this lie fester, and she said that this lie was in the back of her head during every major milestone we shared together. When I asked her to be my girlfriend, when I asked her to move in with me, when I asked her to marry me, when we got pregnant with our baby, when we got married, when we welcomed our baby into the world. Unknown to me, my wife had an inner conflict that our relationship had been built on a lie, and each time one of those milestones passed, she chose to keep up the act instead of coming clean. She says now that she feels much better for having finally come clean, but now we're so far down the road, I don't know what to do. I don't quite know how I would have reacted in the past to this discovery, and that was before we got married and had a kid together. She's my love and my best friend, but I can't shake the feeling that our relationship was built on a lie. I'm also wondering what else my wife is capable of lying about if she could keep something as foundational as how old she is a secret for so long. In fact, all of her new documentation, license, passport has her correct birth year on it now since she changed her name, so it was only a matter of time before I found out. My wife said that she recognized this and was getting ready to write me a letter on the subject. She even showed me her draft of this letter on her phone, dated back a month ago after the second event I mentioned earlier. Apparently, her mom had mentioned to her at that time that she needed to get that date corrected, and today reinforced the point that she needed to say something to me after the third event. My mother-in-law encouraged her to be positive about the situation and that she is still the same person, regardless of her age. My mother-in-law is right about this part. I do love my wife as a partner and a mother, but I'm struggling with the notion that we would have never met if my wife didn't lie about her age, and probably would not have continued our relationship had I found out earlier. Now we have a great family life, but it all started and was perpetuated by a lie. I have no idea how we are going to talk about this with my family or our friends, as this could seriously impact how they see her. My wife and I both grew up in broken homes, and neither of us want to impose that on our children. Part of the reason why my wife claims she didn't tell me the truth is that she was convinced that I would walk out on her and get a divorce. I haven't done that and am instead looking for recommendations on how to navigate this situation. How would you recommend we broach this topic with our friends and family? How can I rebuild my trust in my wife? How can I handle my feelings of betrayal? Update: I want to thank you all for the feedback, good or bad. One thing I want to emphasize is that I do not care that my wife is 5 years older than me. Sure, there was a time where this would have been an issue for me, but we are well past that. The issue for me is and has been the continued lies and actions to support a mistake that was made a long time ago. I also spoke to my wife again today after gathering my thoughts and considering the advice that's been shared here. I told her that I love her, that I have no interest in divorcing, and that I want to be a husband to her and a father to our child. But I also expressed again how hurt I was by her lying to me and that we were going to have to work together to reach a point where I can trust her. This will take time, but I'm sure we can do it, barring any setbacks. We agreed to meet with a counselor weekly until we feel comfortable and are working this week to resolve our documents that have her errant DOB. We also have no plans on discussing this matter with friends or family unless there is a reason to. The one thing we won't do is be deceitful. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. My wife came clean tearfully after 15 years that she never graduated from university. She quit in her final year and never told anyone. On one hand, I had this feeling of sadness that I'd been lied to for years. On the other hand, she'd been carrying around this burden for years. It didn't matter to me. She was just super embarrassed to admit something, And we've all been there, even with a spouse. I just decided to let it wash over me. And honestly, I barely ever thought about it again. Comment 2. Obviously, she is in the wrong here. But assuming this is an isolated incident of lying, which seems plausible given the history of her birth date misprints, I'm not sure what is to be gained by destroying your relationship. You have a brand new baby. I would at minimum get counseling to help navigate this, but I would not end a relationship over this. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments on my last post. They really helped me sort through my feelings and figure out what to do next. So here's what's been happening since then. After my last update, things got pretty intense. My wife and I had a lot of long, hard talks. She was really apologetic and kept saying how much she regretted lying about her age. She explained that when she first made her dating profile, she was just coming out of a rough relationship. Her ex had been really hung up on age, and it made her insecure. She thought by shaving off a couple of years, she'd have a better chance at a fresh start. She never expected to meet someone like me, and by then, the lie had snowballed. I was still feeling pretty betrayed, but I also remembered all the good times we've had together. Like when we went on that road trip for our first anniversary and got lost, but ended up finding that amazing little diner, or when we stayed up all night talking about our dreams for the future. Those memories made me realize that our relationship was more than just a number. We decided to see a counselor, like I mentioned before. It was awkward at first, but it actually helped a lot. We talked about trust and how to rebuild it. The counselor gave us some exercises to do, like sharing something new about ourselves every day. It was kind of fun, actually. I learned that my wife used to be in a band in college, and she learned I'm secretly really into bird watching. But then, just when things were starting to look up, my wife's old ID with the wrong birth year popped up again. She'd been using it as a bookmark in one of her old journals, and it fell out one day when she was showing me some of her poetry from college. My heart sank. It felt like we were back at square one. We had a big fight about it. I couldn't understand why she'd kept it. She said it was just a mistake, that she'd forgotten it was there. But it was hard for me to believe her. I stormed out and went for a walk to clear my head. While I was out, I bumped into my brother-in-law. He could tell something was up, so we grabbed a coffee, and I ended up spilling the whole story. He was shocked, of course, but he also told me something I didn't expect. He said that when he and my wife were kids, their parents had put a lot of pressure on them to be perfect. He thought maybe that's why she felt like she had to lie about her age, to fit into some idea of who she was supposed to be. That conversation changed everything for me. I started to see my wife's lie in a new light. It wasn't just about her trying to deceive me. It was about her trying to meet impossible standards. When I got home, my wife was waiting for me. She'd been crying, and she had all her old IDs spread out on the table, the ones with the wrong birth year, and the new ones with the correct date. She said she wanted to get rid of the old ones together, to show that she was done with that part of her life. So we did. We cut them up and threw them away, and it felt like we were throwing away the last of the lies and secrets. After that, things started to get better fast. We kept seeing the counselor, and we started to feel more like a team again. And then, just last week, something amazing happened. My wife surprised me with a trip for my birthday. She'd arranged for her mom to watch the baby, and we went to this beautiful cabin in the woods. It was just like when we first started dating. All laughter and talking and feeling close. One night, as we were sitting by the fire, she handed me a small box. Inside was a watch I'd been eyeing for months, but had never mentioned to her. She said she'd noticed me looking at it in a store window once. It was a moment that showed me she really knew me, that she paid attention to the little things, and that's when I knew for sure that we were going to be okay. We came back from that trip feeling like a new couple. We're more honest with each other now, and it's like a weight has been lifted. We're planning to renew our vows next year on our real anniversary, with our little one there to celebrate with us. Boyfriend pisses in bottles and keeps them under his bed. But then I confront him. I'm a 20-year-old woman. I've been with my boyfriend for just over a year. We're both at university. A week ago, I was at his house staying the night with him, which I do a lot. I'm usually a really heavy sleeper, while he can sometimes struggle. But I suddenly woke up, and I thought I could hear water running. It took me a few seconds to get my bearings together, and I turned around to see my boyfriend facing away from me. I perched myself up a bit, and I could see that he was urinating in a plastic bottle. I freaked out a bit at first. I was startled and blurted out, "What on earth are you doing?" I wish I reacted more calmly, but I was shocked. At first, he tried to shrug it off like it was nothing, saying the bathroom was occupied with one of his housemates, and he was desperate. I wasn't sure, but then I looked underneath his bed, and I saw 2 other bottles filled with pee. I challenged him again, and then he admitted that he'd been doing it for years, keeping bottles underneath the bed down one of the sides that he pees in after he started to try and sleep. He basically said he does it because he finds it really difficult to get out of bed to go to the bathroom when he's trying to sleep or wakes up needing to pee. He said that he ends up just staring into space for hours and not sleeping because he can't bring himself to get out of the bed to the bathroom. He said he cleans the bottles out every morning when no one else is there. For me, this was super gross, and I couldn't believe he thought it was acceptable. Like, everyone hates getting out of bed to go to the bathroom, but they don't end up peeing in bottles, right? Him doing that is bad enough. But doing it while I'm in bed right next to him, I found so disgusting. The thing is, other than this, he is a super clean, well-kept man who always makes sure to look after himself. It's one of the many things that drew me to him. He's so lovely as well, and I love him. This has come completely out of nowhere, and I have no idea how to react. What should I do? Update. So when I say he has sleeping issues, I mean he has full-on insomnia. When he has to get out of bed for any reason, it makes it almost impossible for him to get any sleep at all after that. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Girl, there are so many men in the world. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, of eligible men who don't urinate in bottles and keep them next to the bed. Please engage with one of those instead. I beg you. Comment 2. Because he can't get himself up when he is trying to sleep. And what happens when the day comes when he cannot get out of bed to have a bowel movement? Is he going to keep a litter box under the bed? Now for the update. Hey everyone. A lot has happened since my last post about my boyfriend's, let's say, unique nighttime habits. I've been with my boyfriend for just over a year, and we're both at university, trying to navigate the ups and downs of college life together. But nothing prepared me for what I discovered a week ago. After I found the bottles of pee under his bed, I was torn between my feelings for him and my disgust at his actions. I mean, he's always been the kind of guy who takes pride in his appearance and cleanliness. He's the one who taught me the importance of ironing my clothes and even how to properly fold a fitted sheet. So, finding out about his secret habit was a shock to my system. I decided to confront him about it again because I needed to understand why he felt this was his only option. He opened up about his insomnia and how getting out of bed to go to the bathroom completely disrupts his already fragile sleep pattern. I could see the embarrassment in his eyes, and it was clear that this was a deeply ingrained issue for him. But here's where things took a turn. 2 days after our conversation, I was studying in the library when I got a text from him asking me to come over as soon as possible. I could tell from his tone that something was wrong. When I got to his place, I found him pacing in the living room, looking more frazzled than I'd ever seen him. He confessed that he had tried to stop using the bottles after our talk, but it resulted in him not sleeping at all for 2 nights straight. He was exhausted, and it was affecting his studies and his mental health. I felt a pang of guilt for pushing him, but I also knew we couldn't continue like this. We decided to seek help together. We found a therapist who specialized in sleep disorders and made an appointment. It was a big step for him, and I was proud of how he was handling it. The therapist was understanding and suggested some strategies to help him cope with his insomnia, including a strict bedtime routine and some relaxation techniques. Things seemed to be looking up until yesterday. I was at his place, and we were cuddling on the couch when his phone buzzed with a message. It was from one of his housemates, and without thinking, I glanced at the screen. The message read, "Dude, your secret stash has been discovered. We need to talk." My heart sank. I felt betrayed all over again. Had he lied to me about stopping? I confronted him, and he went pale. He swore he hadn't used a bottle since our last talk, and he was as confused as I was. We went to his room, and that's when we found it. Underneath his bed, there was a small pile of bottles, but they weren't filled with pee. They were filled with clear liquid. My boyfriend grabbed one, unscrewed the cap, and sniffed it. It was water. He looked at me, just as puzzled as I was. It turns out, his housemates had found out about his habit a while back. They had decided to play a prank on him by filling up bottles with water and hiding them under his bed. They thought it would be a funny way to confront him about it, but with the timing of our recent issues, it just caused more confusion and stress. We had a long talk with his housemates, who apologized profusely for the misunderstanding. They hadn't realized the extent of his insomnia and how serious the situation was. It was a relief to clear the air, but it was also a reminder that sometimes things aren't what they seem. Spouse texts me on my birthday saying they need space and will talk when I return. I extend my trip and find out they cheated on me during a birthday party. I'm so glad I signed a prenup. Oh boy, they are left with a mountain of debt. So I've been away for a couple weeks, going back this week. And 2 weeks ago, on my birthday, he texted me, "Happy birthday. I really need some space, and I want you to enjoy your trip, so we will talk when you're back." Then that's it. Radio silence. No calls after that or anything. I texted asking for an explanation, and all he says is that he wants me to enjoy my trip and grow. I tried to call a few times, but he never picks up. He hasn't called or texted me at all since then. I have no clue what to do now. I'm trying to understand where he is coming from. The past few months haven't been perfect, but I thought we were fine. We didn't even have a fight or anything. I would appreciate some insight on whether I'm being paranoid that he is planning to leave me or not. I know that he consistently has issues with overusing mushrooms and Zaza. He also randomly stops taking his antidepressants. I told him I want to do what I can to make him feel better, but he didn't respond to that either. I feel really abandoned, and I'm alone on a different continent entirely. We have been married a year and dated for 8 years. We were planning on having children in the next couple of years. Edit. Appreciate all the advice, and since so many have asked about checking on him, he's fine. This is a man who gets irritated when I cry. I texted a friend because while ghosting me, he's planned a massive birthday party. Ironically, I planned to have a party in 2 weeks for my birthday, but instead, he had to throw one when I'm gone. And he's getting even more shitty tattoos, has gotten like 10 in the past 6 months. In terms of my relationship, on our first wedding anniversary back in December, he went out with friends who specifically did not want me there. I was hurt, so texted him a little passive-aggressively about the girl who hosted, and he ignored me all night, came back at 5 a.m., and spent our first anniversary hungover. Told me that because I behaved badly by sending that text, he decided to stay out later and ignore me and get wasted. Just the most recent way he ruined another big day. Edit 2. Thanks for all the kind words and advice. I have decided to extend my trip so I can actually enjoy myself since I lost a few days thanks to his behavior. Edit 3. I figured since I'm already deep in this hole, I will mention other things that have been bugging me for a while. He is shoot with money. I'm an emotional spender, but that's like $200 to $300 every few months on clothes, and I work full-time and pay for my own stuff. He got a line of credit a couple years ago and used it all up on, Aita cake what? Some on home renovations, but Aita cake what the rest is for. And it's around $150,000 to $180,000. We have a prenup. He made me sign it 2 days before the wedding. So I'm free of the debt, but yeah. I asked him if we could make sure to communicate when spending over $300 on something, and he said he would do it, but I guess he forgot. He rents out the basement and stuff for money, but doesn't really include me in any of it. I know red flags everywhere. It's just tough because all these things were far enough apart, it didn't seem as bad. Edit 4. So he texted me that he's done. Yeah, while I'm in a different country. Says he's crying too much to talk on the phone. Says it's because he's unhappy lately, and I know that, and he's been pushing for therapy, only for me apparently, and it's not happening. I literally told him I'm starting with a new one after my trip. He doesn't need it though, apparently. This is all the reason it's okay for treat me like this. Edit 5. Likely my last edit. Appreciate all the amazing advice and kindness. I feel like you're all my friends. I'm not even sad. I was sad for a year. I feel like I silently quit this marriage and finished my tears. It's his turn to cry since this was his decision anyway. You all rock. Also, I downloaded Tinder. Don't judge me. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. If my husband said that to me, I'd book the first flight out and not tell him. Surprise is on your side if you really want to know what's going on. And I mean, if you don't have your car at the airport, take an Uber home and just show up unannounced. That way, he doesn't have any lead time if he's up to something. Is there any way you can remotely check his devices to see what he's up to? Even checking the activity on your cell phone account, etc. Do you have anyone you trust at home who can find out? Just be careful who you talk to. And don't confide this with your best friend, girl. Comment 2. You're on the other side of the planet, and he still needs some space. How can you say, happy birthday, I really need some space? Is that code for, I'm really liking all this free time with Jennifer and want to make it a full-time gig? It's definitely code for something unpleasant. Sorry, but you don't have the marriage you wanted. It may in fact be deceased. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around after my last post. It's been a busy couple of weeks, and I've got some updates that I think you'll find pretty interesting. So, after my husband dropped the bomb on me while I was abroad, I decided to take your advice and extend my trip. I needed the space to clear my head, and honestly, it was the best decision I could have made. I've been exploring, meeting new people, and just trying to enjoy myself. But of course, life back home didn't pause. Remember how I mentioned my husband's impromptu birthday bash? Well, turns out it was more than just a party. A friend sent me a video from the event, and there he was, cozying up to someone who definitely wasn't me. My heart sank, but I wasn't surprised. This was the same guy who'd been acting distant and had a history of questionable decisions. Speaking of decisions, let's talk about his financial habits. I've always known he was bad with money, but I didn't realize the extent of it until recently. A mutual friend, who's also our financial advisor, let slip that my husband had taken out another loan. This time, it was for a business venture that sounded more like a pipe dream. I couldn't believe it. We'd talked about being more responsible, especially since we'd been considering starting a family. But there he was, throwing our plans out the window. Now, about that prenup he made me sign. Thank goodness for that. I've been talking to a lawyer, and it looks like I won't be responsible for any of his debts. It's a small silver lining in this mess. But here's where things get really juicy. I got a call from the girl who hosted that anniversary party, the one he spent our first anniversary hungover after attending. She was crying, apologizing for getting involved with my husband. She said she didn't know he was married at first, and when she found out, she ended things. But he kept pursuing her, even after our split. She felt guilty and wanted to come clean to me. I was floored. It was like the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His behavior, the late nights, the distance, it all made sense now. But I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I had already started to move on, remember? I even had a few dates from Tinder. Nothing serious, but it was nice to feel wanted again. Then, the most unexpected thing happened. My husband started calling me nonstop. When I finally answered, he was sobbing, begging for forgiveness. He said he realized he'd made a huge mistake and wanted to work things out. But I was done. I told him it was too late, that I deserved better, and that I was moving on with my life. And here's the subtle justice that's been served. His business venture? It flopped. Big time. He's now drowning in debt, and the girl he cheated with wants nothing to do with him. He's alone, and from what I've heard, the friends who used to encourage his bad behavior have started to distance themselves. As for me, I'm back home now, feeling stronger and more independent than ever. I've got a new job lined up, and I'm excited about the future. It's not going to be easy, but I'm ready for this new chapter. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.